It's funny because as Mike was doing that, I'm looking back and thinking, if my dad were here, he'd just laugh. He would just laugh because he'd say, excuse me, as Mike mentioned, I started working in television when I was 16, and it was fun. It was fun to do. But my dad kept saying, okay, go work. And I just did it, and then suddenly I was 20. He was like, okay, the joke's over now, go get a job. Because my dad was a construction worker, so he was a laborer, manual laborer. So for him, it was you go out, if you don't come home dirty and sweaty, then you clearly have not worked that day. So you need to go out and work. I'm now older than 30 and 40 and more than that. And my dad's still like, okay, let me see if I understand this. They really pay you to do this. And I said, yeah, Dad, thank God, because I've got 2 full-time kids at university now and another one that's going to get there soon. So yeah, I better be getting paid for it. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning. Thank you very much. I hope you don't mind if I pick up this microphone and walk around with it. I work behind a desk during my day job, and so it's a good opportunity to get out from behind it. As Mike mentioned, I started when I was 16 years old. I never did it because I thought one day I want to be on TV. I just did it because it was fun. I did it because I enjoyed it, and then they started paying me for it, and I thought, okay, this is cool. This is really cool. My first job I actually got at Sportsline. You guys remember Jim Taddy in the old days of Sportsline? That was the flagship first half-hour show. I started working there in the early 80s. I walked in off the street. All I had done was cable TV, local volunteer work, which I wasn't paid for. And I walked in and I said, listen, I'd like to work for you because you're the best in the business. He goes, yeah, there's a lot of people that would like to work for me. Why should I hire you? And I said, I'll work for free. He said, okay, you're in. So I worked for free for about 3 months, and at the end of the 3-month period, I went to him and said, okay, I promise you 3 months. Thanks for the opportunity. He goes, well, where are you going? And I said, well, I'm not going to work for free the rest of my life. He goes, no, I'll pay you. So I worked there for Sportsline for a couple of years and then went over to TSN. How many of you guys remember the Seoul Olympics, 1988? The little bit of news broke there. That was my big break in the business. At TSN, we have what's called the TSN turning point, the moment in the game or an event where everything shifts, everything completely changes, the momentum, everything. 1988 was that year for me. I was working the overnights in the Seoul Olympics. We got reports that somebody had tested positive for the use of steroids, and this is back before we understood even what steroids were. And they talked about it, and they said, well, someone's tested positive. Then it became, ooh, somebody who won a race tested positive. Then it became, oh, somebody who won a race and is a Canadian. And that pretty much cut it down. Because at that point, we only had one guy that was winning a race, and it was Canadian. And it was amazing what happened that night with Ben Johnson testing positive for steroids. Suddenly, I became the Ben Johnson steroid expert, because at that point, I was skinny. I was about 165 pounds and clearly on steroids myself. So I suddenly became the expert in that. So that's the way it all started. So it almost kind of fell into my lap. When I look back on it and go, God clearly must have had a plan for my life, because I had no plan. It's funny because poor parents bring their kids to me and say, would you mind speaking to my child about your goals and ambitions and what you did? And I'm like, okay, but I'd have to lie. Because I didn't really know what I was going to do. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. It was something that God had planned for me that I had no idea on. And what it's done now is given me the opportunity to be at some great moments. I've been at Grey Cups. I've been at Stanley Cups. I was at, you guys remember what happened last February at the Olympic Games, I guess a little more than last February, a February and a half ago, when Canada paraded on center ice with the flag, Sidney Crosby and company celebrating the gold medal. Some unbelievable moments. It's brought me to some unbelievable places. And what it's given me is a phenomenal platform to go out and do other stuff that I really feel I really, really want to do. Because let's face it, what we do is just entertainment. It's fun. It's fun, but there are way more significant things in life that I've been able to do now because of that opportunity. Jody was sharing about the fact that they got a chance to go to Africa. A number of years ago, I got a chance to go to Africa, and to see what's going on there is absolutely unbelievable. Unbelievable. And we're left walking away and going, we have so much, they have so little. And yet they have some things that we don't have. I remember one time, one of the days that we spent shooting, we went to a little village, and outside the village there was a little hut that was completely on its own, separated from the rest of the village, because his family had been ostracized. And I won't go into the specific reasons for that, but they had been ostracized. And there were 2 little girls and a father. The father wasn't there when we arrived with our cameras, so we shot and did the interviews. We'd already set this up ahead of time. We did the interviews with the 2 young girls. And they were, I think, at that point, 8 and 10. And that's where they were. They didn't go to school. They didn't have crops or food or anything like that. Basically, they lived day to day. The dad wasn't there. By the time we had probably wrapped up our shoot, for about a half an hour after we had wrapped up our shoot, the dad they said, Dad will be home in a little while. And all of a sudden we heard somebody singing. We heard somebody singing, a voice singing, and we thought, when you look around in Africa, the last thing you expect to hear is somebody singing. And sure enough, it was the dad coming home from, I won't say from work, coming home from what he had done that day, riding a bicycle and singing, and we were just blown away. We all just went dead silent. We were like, in the midst of this, how do you sing? And through an interpreter, we sat him down, set up the camera, and interviewed him. And basically the gist of what he said was, I have everything. I have my children, and I have my God. What else could I ask for? And it's moments like that it kind of puts it all in perspective, and you go, man, I lost sight of what's going on. It's interesting, what we've seen is a shift in television, and specifically in my role. My role when I first started in the television industry a number of years ago, we were all about entertaining. We were constantly told by everybody, just keep people entertained, just keep them entertained. If you keep them entertained, your goal, they'll come back because they were entertained. Well, our society, as you well know now, has shifted. No, entertainment is no longer good enough because entertainment's everywhere. Entertainment's on the internet, entertainment's when you step outside your door, entertainment's on TV, on your computer, everywhere. So it's completely shifted from what it used to be, which was purely entertainment, to now informing. If you can't inform your audience constantly, because we have an insatiable, voracious hunger for information. We always want more information. No matter how much information we have, we want more and more. It used to be that you just say, I'll look forward to the 6 o'clock news to find out what happened today. Now it's no longer good enough. You can't wait for the 6 o'clock news. It used to be that we all wanted to acquire things, acquire possessions. Now all we want to do is acquire information. Look at the different sources that we have now. The whole social media, texting. People are constantly on their phones. And you're on your phones like, did you hear what happened? Did you hear what's going on? This is what's happening tonight. Here's where we're going tomorrow. Did you see this video? Did you see that? Video's gone completely viral. You'll see a video, is it Suzanne Boyce? Is that her name? Suzanne Boyce, the singer? The lady? Boyle, sorry. Suzanne Boyle. See, I'm all about information. I don't get it right, but I have information. Susan Boyle, who did Britain's Got Talent, I guess it started Britain's Got Talent, she sang that song, and she went from the cat lady, they used to call her, because she hung around at home with her cats on her own. No one knew who she was. No one liked her. She had no money. She had no future, nothing. Till one night she sang a song. It hit the internet, went viral. Millions and millions and millions of people viewed that on YouTube and other sorts of video. Overnight, she became a multimillionaire. And now you can't go anywhere without seeing her face. Not everybody remembers her name, apparently, but you can't go everywhere without seeing her face. There's Facebook, there's Twitter. It's interesting, at my age, I'm on the air now on a nightly basis saying, hey, got a question, tweet us, or follow me on Twitter tonight. You want to talk more about this? Join the conversation on Facebook. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I have no clue. We were at the Olympic Games in Vancouver, and one of our PR guys said, Gino, people are watching the show in the morning. They want to know how they can follow you during the day to find out what you're doing. And I said, well, I'll tell them tomorrow morning. And they said, no, that's not good enough. You got to tell them now. We're going to put you on Twitter. I said, okay, is that bad? Honestly, I had no clue what Twitter was at that point. I wasn't following anybody. I had no idea. I had people talking about it. I pretended to just kind of, yeah, Twitter, yeah. No clue. They hooked me up on my BlackBerry. Now I can't go anywhere without telling people what I've done. And people follow it, and it's just insane, our desire and our appetite for that kind of stuff. What's happened is we have gone in the media business, and I'm going to let you in on some inside scoop here. What we do in the media business is create a need. Because it's not good enough just to tell people things and inform them. In order for me to encourage you to follow me on Twitter, and for me to encourage you to watch our show, we're on Monday to Friday at 7 o'clock, I've got to create a need to you. I've got to tell you why it's important that you know this. So we call them teases, we call them bumpers, we call them headlines. Little things like, hey, wait till you hear what happened with Jordan Tutu today. We're going to tell you about his suspension. Why did Jordan Tutu get suspended for 2 games? I'll tell you tonight at 7 o'clock. And now some of you are like, who the heck is Jordan Tutu? And it's like, I'm Googling that when I get back home to find out what that was. Am I right? That's what we do now. We've created a need. We've created a vacuum. A lot of times people think of a vacuum. You think of a vacuum cleaner and it sucks up dirt off the ground. Well, that's what we're all about in the media business. We're about creating vacuums. And I just found this out as I was kind of researching for this. Do you know how a straw works? Have you ever thought about how a straw works? Like people go, yeah, I suck and pop comes out of the straw. Well, the way a straw works is by sucking, you're creating a vacuum in the straw. And what happens is once you create the vacuum in the straw, the fluid, whatever it is, a pop or whatever it is, goes into that vacuum. And you've also created a vacuum inside your mouth. And it goes out of that vacuum through the straw, out of the vacuum in your mouth and down your throat. And that's how it works. A lot of you go, well, duh, Gene. The 2 points there. One is I had no clue that's exactly how it worked. I just did it. That's how it worked. But two, more importantly, understand that that's what we in the media do, is we are constantly trying to create a vacuum. And you'll experience it on your own. One of the ways is by creating an information vacuum. We tease you by saying, did you hear about this or did you see that? So all of a sudden now you want more information. We tease you in commercials with, why do you buy stuff? Because we put on the commercial telling you why you need that. You could be watching television and not be the least bit hungry. Well, man, I used to host the sports desk and sports center, late night shows at 11 o'clock, and right in the commercials, we'd have these stupid keg commercials. And I'm not slamming the keg, but what happened was you'd see a sizzling steak, and all of a sudden, I'm not the least bit hungry. But now I'm watching a steak sizzling and thinking, oh, I'm hitting the keg on the way home because I'm hungry. It suddenly created a vacuum and need in me that I didn't have before I saw that commercial. It's all about that. We're all about experiencing certain things in our lives that suddenly we feel like there's something now missing. And some of the vacuums are natural. An innate desire for us to learn. When you're a child, you learn, you grow, you find out more information, you want more information. There's more words all of a sudden. There's more things you can do. There's more foods you can taste. And it's that vacuum, it's that need all of a sudden that I want to learn things. Some are man-made vacuums, like the ones I was just talking about. The fact that all of a sudden we are helping you to see a need that you didn't think you had. A place to go that you didn't think existed, and all of a sudden, well, now I got to go there. A taste of something that you have never tasted yet, but suddenly it looks so unbelievably delicious. I've got to try that. Another vacuum, and this is the one I want to get to, is we're just now coming to understand vacuums that we were born with in our lives. Blaise Pascal, who was a French philosopher, a mathematician, and a physicist back in 1623 to 1662, wrote this: "There is a God-shaped vacuum in the heart of every man which cannot be filled by any created thing, but by only God, the Creator, made known through Jesus Christ." C.S. Lewis is a wonderful author. You may recognize C.S. Lewis has written the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that have been made into movies most recently. A brilliant series of books, a brilliant man who basically did two things in his life. He talked to his peers to figure out where he was wrong and where he was right, and then he wrote to communicate those things. And here's something C.S. Lewis wrote in a book called Mere Christianity. "Creatures are not born with desires unless satisfaction for those desires exists. A baby feels hunger, so there's such thing as food. A duckling wants to swim, well, there's such thing as water. Men and women feel sexual desire, well, there's such thing as sex. If I find in myself," and this is the crux, "if I find in myself a desire in which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. Earthly pleasures were never meant to satisfy our desires, but only to arouse this awareness to suggest the real thing, a relationship with God." These are the words from C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity. God, you see, created us for a relationship with Him. People go, well, why did God create people? Why did God create people with choices specifically? Why did He create people with an opportunity to sin? God created us for a relationship with Him. And if we don't have that relationship with Him, suddenly there's something missing. Suddenly there is a vacuum in our lives. That is a God-created vacuum. In much the same way that we create a sense of need for that steak, or a sense of need for that taste, or a sense of need for that place, or a sense of need for that information, God created a sense of need in each and every one of our lives. The question is, how do we fill that vacuum? And there are many different ways that we can do that. And there are many different ways that we've chosen to do that. The question is, are you happy with what you're putting into that vacuum? And a lot of us have decided the way we're going to fill that vacuum is through possessions, through material things. And a lot of time for the short term it works. George Carlin was a comic who was a number of decades ago. Some of you may remember him. If you do remember him, many of you remember him, that he was very vulgar at times. He was very famous for the 7 words you can't say on TV, and he said them all during his routine. I'm not going to go into the 7 words you can't say on TV, but there is one thing. He was a very bright man. He was a man in a lot of pain. He was a man looking in a lot of wrong directions, but he was a very, very brilliant man. And he once wrote this in one of his routines, a routine he called Stuff. You know what your house is? A place to keep your stuff. If you didn't have so much stuff, you wouldn't need a house. A house is just a pile of stuff with a cover on it. You see, everybody's got a little pile of stuff, all the little piles of stuff. And when you leave your house, you got to lock it up. Wouldn't want somebody to come up and take some of your stuff. Yep, that's what your house is, a place to keep your stuff while you go out and get more stuff. Brilliant, is it not brilliant? And now it goes on and on and on, and he talks about how the fact that when you go to on a vacation, you grab some of your stuff, and then you take that with you. And when you're on vacation, and then you go on a day trip, you grab your most important stuff, and then that's the stuff with you you've got on that one day trip. And then when you go on that one day trip and you go out for dinner, then you got to take your really, really, really important stuff, and then you take that really, really important stuff out for dinner because you don't want anybody stealing your stuff. And then at that point, you realize what you've got left at that point is all the stuff that really matters. When all the other stuff is gone, the house, the clothes, everything else is gone, that's all that really matters. Who discovered that more than Stephen Jobs most recently? If you're looking for somebody who's got a lot of stuff, he's got a lot of stuff. And if you read his book, you'd realize that when it all was said and done, he was left wondering, what was all the stuff about? I mean, there are very few humans alive who had as much money and stuff as he had. And yet, at the complete opposite end of the pole of where Stephen Jobs is, was that father singing, coming home from work. Because the only stuff he had was his kids and his God. August 8, 2006. And I didn't know if I was going to share this with you, but I will share this with you. I had a lot of stuff. It was my birthday, so I remember the date very clearly. It was August 8th. I had a wife, 2 kids, tons of cash, doing quite well, feeling very good about life. And then on my birthday, I found out that my wife was gone. And I was left with 2 teenage kids, no sense of what I was going to do from that point on. And at that point, I was reading in my Bible the book of Job. For those of you who know, you know exactly what I'm talking about. For those of you who don't know what Job's all about, it's a story about a man who had a lot of stuff, who had a lot of possessions, who had a big family, and gradually he lost it all. It was all taken away from him. And in God's sense of humor, that's where I was during this time when all this stuff happened. But I was thankful because what I did have was some very, very strong people in my life. My pastor, my best friends, my kids, who had poured into my life some very significant information that basically said when everything else is gone, is God in your life. When everything else is, and I just prayed to God, God, just don't take away my kids too. You can have everything else, but just don't take away my kids. You see, because stuff is good when everything is good. It's okay. You feel good. You don't notice the vacuum so much when everything is good. There is no vacuum because you got a great car, you got a great job, you got a great family, you got a great house, you got some great stuff. So you don't notice the vacuum. You can shield that vacuum. You can fill that vacuum in your life with a lot of other stuff when everything's good. But then what happens when all of a sudden you've lost your job? The market takes a dive. All that security that you had is suddenly gone. A death of a loved one, a marriage breakup. Then what happens? Then you're left with that vacuum and nothing else. So the question is, my first question I want to ask you is, what are you putting into that vacuum in your life? What's in there right now for you? And are you confident that if all of a sudden things started falling apart, you're still okay? That's the first question. The second question, I think this is just important, is what are you doing about pouring stuff helping other people to fill the vacuum in their lives? What are you doing for other people who are significant, for your children, for your peers, for your coworkers, for the students you work with? What are you doing for them in terms of helping them fill the vacuum? I remember Charles Barkley. Remember a few years ago, Charles Barkley got himself into trouble, and he basically didn't apologize for what he was doing. He came out and said, I'm no role model. Don't look at me as a role model. Don't look at my life and say that's what I want to do. I live my life. I'm not a role model. I got news for you, folks. Every single one of us in here is a role model, whether you know it or not. Because every time you open your mouth, somebody's listening. Everything you do, somebody's watching. Sometimes you find that out because you start paying attention. Other times you find it out in a very difficult, harsh way. I found that out difficulty sometimes with my kids when I realized something was going on that all of a sudden I saw, wow, that's me in them. A great thing. Do you have that video, guys? You all set with the video? Yeah. I want to show you a video, and this is a couple in our church, and it just kind of happened a few days ago, so God's timing is amazing. There's a mother, daughter, and her little boy. So it's 3 generations. You following me here? This just happened a few days ago. The mother and daughter decided they wanted to memorize some scripture for Christmas. So they wanted to memorize the Christmas story in the Bible. So for about a month and a half, they worked on it together. The mom would go to the daughter's house, and they would work on memorizing these passages together. The mother one day was standing in front of the mirror, saying it out loud, trying to memorize it, and then all of a sudden something very unusual happened. Somebody else was listening. Watch.
In your shepherds, the leaders in the right, keeping watch over the flocks by night. An angel Lord appeared to them, and the glorious love shone all around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Don't be afraid. I can use the news and rejoice before me today." And they count the seven, and Savior has been with you. He's Christ the Lord. This will be a song to you. We will find a baby wrapped in cloth and lying in a manger. Suddenly, and company abandoned hope with Peter with the angel, praising God and saying, "Glory God highest, today and on earth, peace to men unto his favorite."
Is that not amazing? Charles Barkley, you are a role model. Every single one of us here today is a role model. Every single one of us here today has somebody watching you, has somebody paying attention to what you're doing, and is learning from you. The question is, are you happy with what you're pouring into their lives? Are you happy with the way that you are aiding them to fill the vacuum in their lives? That was completely unintentional. That just happened. She had no idea he was listening. She had no idea he was watching, and he just started repeating it with her. And then all of a sudden she went, I got to get the video camera. Because it was one of those moments you just can't replace. It's pretty amazing. So today I asked you to do 3 things. One is recognize that, yes, indeed, there is a God-shaped vacuum in your life and in the life of those around you. Recognize that it's there. Let's come to terms with that. Secondly, evaluate it. Evaluate what you're putting into that vacuum. Are you happy with what's going in there? Are you happy with what you're doing? Are you happy with the steps you're taking? And if you are, fantastic. And if you're not, maybe it's time to make a change. And the third thing is plan for it. Be intentional about what goes into that vacuum. Don't let it just happen. You decide. Don't let us in the media decide. You decide what should be in there. You decide what you want to fill that God-shaped vacuum with. You figure out who you want to help fill the vacuum in their lives, and you help to be deliberate about what you're doing. Be cautious, because it's going on. 2 questions for you today. And if you forget everything else, please remember this. The first question is, what am I doing to fill the God-shaped vacuum in my life? What are you doing? 2, what am I doing to help somebody else fill the God-shaped vacuum in their lives? And then you figure it out. You walk away, you talk to your peers, you talk to your mentors, talk to people, and then figure out the answer to those 2 questions for you. There's a story that's told of a great king about 300 years ago who had tremendous wealth, and one of the great things that he had in his kingdom and his wealth was a tremendous character that he wanted to share that wealth with the people. So what he did was, once a year, he would take a huge bag of gold on the back of a cart, and he would wheel through the city streets with that bag of gold and share it with his people of the kingdom. So obviously you can imagine the kind of celebration they would have on the day when the king was coming with the gold. And it became an annual thing, so they all knew that it was going to go on. So what would happen is, days beforehand, people would come from the regions all over the place and line up the path that they knew that he was going to take. One of the people on the path was a man, older man, that on his own, all he had was a bowl of rice. And that's all he would do. He would survive on his bowl of rice. He would beg during the days, buy rice with that, and then the rice would be the sustenance to keep him alive. So he had nothing but free time on his hands, so he sat on the path days in advance, so he had a good front row seat for when the king came along. And then they waited, the crowds built, it was jammed, everybody's pushing and shoving so they could get the king's ear. And the king finally made his way with his bag of gold. And the people would yell, alms, alms for the poor, alms for the poor. And this little guy with his bowl of rice, hanging on tightly to his bowl of rice so that nobody else could grab it and reach in and grab while the king was coming by because they were distracted. They would yell, alms, alms, alms. And the king, through these thousands of voices, heard this one man's voice. And he said, stop the cart. And when the king stopped the cart in front of you, you knew, okay, now there's a chance. There's thousands of people here, but now there's probably only maybe 500 or 600 people that the king may choose from. So now it's even louder for those people. Alms, alms for the poor. And this little guy's clutching his rice and looking up to the king and praying, God, please let him pick me, let him pick me. And sure enough, the king walked off his cart, walked up to the man with a bowl of rice. And the man said, oh, this is it. My life's going to be changed. This is fantastic. And the king looked down at him, and he was thinking, okay, the king's going to ask me how much I need, what I can use, maybe I'll ask for a little bit of this. And the king just said, sir, give me your rice. And all of a sudden, the crowd goes silent. And he didn't say this out loud because he didn't want to get killed, but he thought, dude, you're loaded. You got so much and you want my rice? Like, seriously? Seriously? He didn't say that. He just kind of looked at him in terror. And the king said to him again, sir, give me your rice. And he paused and hesitated and thought, this is all I have. This is what keeps me alive. This is all I've got. I can't give him my rice. I'm going to give him his rice. He doesn't need my rice. But if I don't give him, he's going to kill me. He'll have me executed or whatever. I don't know. So he looked at the king, looked at his bowl of rice, grabbed a couple of kernels of rice. The king had both his hands out, grabbed a couple of kernels of rice and put them in the king's hand. In fear, as his hand was shaking because he's thinking, this could be my last day on earth. The king just kind of paused, looked at the 2 grains of rice in his hand, turned, walked back to his cart, grabbed 2 gold coins, brought them back, and gave them to the man. Obviously tremendously disappointed. Turned around, got back in his cart, and moved on to continue to share what he had, to continue to share his wealth. And all the man was left with wondering was, what if I gave him all my rice? What if I gave him everything I had? And he was left wondering. Today, let me ask you, are you clutching so hard on some things in your life that, well, the king is offering you so much more than you have, that it's getting in the way of what he's got for you, what he could offer you if you were willing to give him the little that you have? Because relatively speaking, there's so little that we can give God. He doesn't need our rice. There's nothing we can give God that he doesn't have millions and billions of fold more than we can give him? Are we existing on the few kernels? Or are you willing to say, what if I did give God what little I had? What could he do with it? Would it change my life forever? It's risky, because what you have is yours, it's secure, you know what it is, it's solid, you can feel it. It's a huge risk. But what if you give it all? There is that vacuum there. What are you filling the vacuum with? Are you filling it with the rice that you think will fill that vacuum? Or are you filling it with the gold that God is standing by waiting to offer you? Are you happy with what you have there right now? And I pray that you are. But I also pray that if you're not happy with what you have there, that you'll begin to offer up the rest, so that God can give you so much more than you ever possibly could imagine. Thank you for allowing me to share this morning. I'll be around for a while. Thank you.